Seen through a satellite lens 3,106,856 miles from Earth, the North Pacific is no longer a calm band of deep blue. It's boiling, 4 gigantic white vortices, spinning wildly like 4 eyes of death, staring straight down at Southeast Asia. Never before in the history of modern meteorology has the ocean erupted so simultaneously and so brutally this late in the year. On the ground at 0 hour, no siren can function anymore. Everything is drowned out by the roar of shrieking wind, a sound like thousands of jet engines tearing the sky apart right overhead. Corrugated metal roofs are ripped away, whipping through the air like blades. And then a pitch-black wall of water 50 feet high slams in, crushing high-rise buildings and erasing every trace of life in the blink of an eye. But the most terrifying thing isn't the appearance of 4 storms. What's truly horrifying is when they decide to join hands and merge into a single entity. Welcome to nature's worst-case scenario. The birth of the first Category 6 super typhoon in human history. In November, by nature's rules, this is when the ocean is supposed to start cooling down. But this year, the South China Sea and the waters east of the Philippines are heating up abnormally. Sea surface temperatures hold at 87.8 degrees Fahrenheit. An endless fuel tank ready to ignite any spark thrown into it. And the first spark is named Yinxing. Yinxing drives straight into northern Luzon like a steel drill bit. No one expected a late-season storm to reach winds of 149 miles per hour so quickly. It tears through old-growth forests and rips roofs clean off in Cagayan. But then something strange begins to happen. Normally, after friction with land, a storm weakens and falls apart. But Yinxing doesn't. After the devastation, its remnants don't disappear. It hovers over the South China Sea like a ghost, spinning slowly, waiting for its allies. Just a few days later, Toraji appears to the east. Unlike Yinxing's direct, head-on brutality, Toraji brings a crueler weapon: water. It makes landfall in Aurora province at midnight while people are fast asleep. Billions of tons of water pour down onto the Cordillera Range. A thunderous blast echoes through the pitch-black night. It isn't thunder, it's the sound of mountains breaking apart. Millions of cubic meters of waterlogged earth and rocks surge down like a mud flood waterfall, wiping out vital roads. Villages at the foot of the mountains are buried alive in an instant as rescue forces stand by, powerless to do anything. But nature isn't finished yet. Usagi reveals its true form, a monster in disguise. In just 24 short hours, it rapidly intensifies from an unnamed tropical storm into a Category 5 super typhoon. The central pressure plunges with no sign of stopping. Usagi barrels into northeastern Philippines. With the viciousness of an ambush attacker, it strikes what Toraji and Yinxing left behind. The power grid collapses completely. Millions of people are swallowed by darkness. Explosions from transformer stations light up the night sky like fireworks at the end of the world. Floodwaters rise all the way to the rooftops. The people of Coro tremble on freezing corrugated rooftops, staring at the churning black water below, carrying livestock carcasses and fragments of everyday life along with it. And then the final card is turned over: Manyi. When satellites capture Manyi, far offshore, it is already a fully formed monster, its eye razor-sharp and perfectly defined as if drawn with a compass. With winds over 124 miles per hour. Forecast for November 10th. In the early morning hours, it will move into the South China Sea. Normally, these storms would pass one by one and then fade away. But today, an extremely rare meteorological phenomenon occurs. A massive subtropical high-pressure dome suddenly forms to the north, an invisible wall that blocks the escape route of all 4 systems. They are trapped together in a tight atmospheric cage, 4 giant spinning tops whirling on a tilted table. The pull from low-pressure cores begins drawing them closer, and the remnants of Yinxing over the South China Sea suddenly come back to life. Re-energized by moisture from Toraji as it pushes in, Usagi behind gets tugged off course by Manyi's gravitational pull. The South China Sea begins to groan. Even the most seasoned fishermen have never seen the sea behave like this. Waves don't break in rhythm anymore. It boils and seethes. The surface foams up in a blanket of white bubbles. Whales and dolphins, the creatures most sensitive to sound waves, begin rushing onto shore in mass strandings. Their bodies lie scattered across beaches from the Philippines to central Vietnam. Eyes half open, as if warning that something horrific is about to crash down. The sky changes color, no longer the dull gray of storm clouds. It turns a bruised purple. Sunlight refracts through layers of thick cloud, creating a ghostly glow that coats everything in a deadly tint. At meteorological observation stations, scientists stare at the radar screens, faces drained of all color. Forecast models running on supercomputers return nothing but errors. No algorithm was ever coded to handle a situation like this. 4 storm cores spiral toward a single convergence point in the open sea. On land, the first biological warning signs begin assaulting people. Atmospheric pressure drops to a record low, making the air thin and oppressive. The elderly and children start to struggle for breath, chests tightening. People with a history of heart disease collapse in waves even before the storm truly makes landfall. Hospitals overflow not from injuries, but from stroke cases triggered by the pressure differential. Global disaster warning systems broadcast frantic signals. From the Joint Typhoon Warning Center to the Japan Meteorological Agency, everyone issues the same urgent message. Catastrophic threat, evacuate immediately. But evacuate where? When both sky and ground are being squeezed by 4 deathly pincers. 9 p.m. on the infrared satellite feed. The boundaries between the 4 storms begin to blur. Outer bands of Manyi begin brushing against Usagi's tail. Toraji and Yinxing fuse into one massive rotating air mass. The offshore howl of wind no longer comes in bursts. It becomes a single, continuous sound, shaking the very foundations of houses. Like the roar of a colossal beast awakening after 1,000 years' sleep. Seagulls, normally the toughest creatures in wind and storm, now drop and rain down into the sea like dried leaves. Beneath the surface, ocean currents are thrown into chaos. Cold water from 656 feet below is sucked up to the surface, only to be instantly superheated by the frictional energy of the storm winds. A gigantic water column begins forming at the convergence point, spiraling upward, towering into the cloud layers. Small and trembling, people can only bolt their doors, clasp their hands, and pray. But tonight, those prayers may not escape an atmosphere locked tight by these 4 monsters. The fusion has begun. And when it is complete, the world will have to redefine the word disaster at 2 a.m. 4 eyes, 4 separate monsters finish their deadly mating ritual. A single eye opens in the middle of the Pacific. A hollow, pitch-black eye, stretching 62 miles wide. So massive, you can clearly see the seafloor being churned up from space. This is no longer a tropical storm. This is Leviathan, the first Category 6 super typhoon in human history. No scale still means anything sustained. Winds hold at 217 miles per hour. Gusts spike to 261 miles per hour. Central pressure, 850 HPA. It isn't just wind. It's a gigantic meat grinder, made of air and water, racing forward at the speed of a high-speed train. Louis is the first victim. This island doesn't take a storm. It gets skinned alive the moment Leviathan's outer edge hits the coast. It doesn't blow roofs off. It lifts entire houses into the air. Even the strongest reinforced concrete buildings begin to shake violently, like they're sitting on a rug being snapped hard. Window glass in Manila's high-rises shatters all at once, turning into a deadly rain of shards that blasts into the apartments inside. TV towers, antenna masts, giant billboards. All of it is snapped apart, whipped down the streets like plastic toys. Cars parked along the roads are rolled end over end by the wind and slam into each other, erupting into sharp, explosive crashes. But the wind is only the overture. The true destroyer is a meteorological tsunami. With pressure so low, the sea surface is sucked upward, resonating with the insane winds, creating a 66-foot wall of water that crashes ashore. It doesn't pull back like an earthquake-driven tsunami. It rises and it stays. Seawater pushes inland as far as 6.2 miles at the port of Manila. Container ships, weighing 55,115 tons, are lifted out of the water and hurled straight into poor coastal neighborhoods. A colossal steel ship crushes an entire city block, grinding hundreds of fragile wooden homes beneath it into splinters. The groan of metal colliding with concrete, the crack of snapping wood, and the desperate screams of people buried beneath the chaotic wreckage of ships and houses. All of it blending into a single symphony of hell. Where are humans in this picture? They are living through absolute panic. Shelters are packed beyond capacity. Water begins seeping into the basements, rising fast. In pitch-black darkness, children screaming as pressure makes their ears throb, the sound of the elderly praying, the thuds of floating debris colliding in the murky water. They realize a horrifying truth. Nowhere is safe. Leviathan searches every corner after crushing Luzon. Leviathan doesn't weaken at all. On the contrary, its structure tightens even more. From satellite view, a bizarre phenomenon appears. Around the gigantic eye, dozens of waterspouts form, like the tentacles of a colossal octopus, sucking seawater up into the sky and racing at terrifying speed toward Vietnam's coast at the offshore oil platforms near Vung Tau. Those massive steel structures, designed to withstand Category 15 storms, now look as fragile as toothpicks. Waves crash over the entire workdeck 98 feet high. The steel framework begins to twist. A weary groan of metal rings out. And then one rig buckles, collapsing into the sea, dragging down a still-burning gas flare with it, raising a gigantic boiling steam column in the middle of the ocean. Early warning systems have been completely paralyzed. Coastal radar stations were blown away hours ago. Now people can only feel the disaster with their own skin. At midday, the sky turns ink black. The wind starts screaming in waves, carrying the harsh salt of the sea and the raw stench of mud. And then Leviathan hits flood on top of flood, storm on top of storm. The earlier rains from Toraji have already saturated the ground. Now Leviathan dumps an unimaginable amount of rain. The mountains can't bear the weight anymore, they split apart. A red-brown mud flash flood surges down from the slopes, carrying boulders as big as cars and thousands of snapped tree trunks. It charges like a giant python, swallowing every village in its path. Concrete bridges are snapped in half like crackers. Out at sea, the meteorological tsunami rises up, blocking the river water's way out. The water can't drain into the ocean. It backs up and surges upward at a terrifying rate. Riverside cities turn into gigantic reservoirs. Water reaches the second floor in just 30 minutes. People smash through roof tiles and crawl onto rooftops, soaked and shaking in 105 miles per hour winds. Expensive cars float like paper boats, bump into streetlights, and trigger anti-theft alarms that wail pointlessly. Five-star hotel billboards are shredded by the wind, whipping through the air and slicing palm trees clean in half. The national power grid collapses completely. Darkness swallows 311 miles of coastline, and in that darkness, only the sickly green flashes of exploding substations illuminate the chaos. The howling wind drowns out crying and people calling for each other. Humans become pitifully small. On a lone high-rise rooftop, stranded in an endless sea of water, a man struggles to hold his small child tightly in his arms. His torn raincoat lashes his face, stinging with every strike. He looks toward the horizon, where Leviathan's eye is advancing, with a thick wall of black clouds spiraling like the mouth of an abyss. In that moment, he realizes, this isn't a natural disaster, this is punishment. People clinging to rooftops begin to exhaust themselves. Their hands go numb and frozen, and little by little they let go. One by one, they're swept away by the wind, or swallowed by the pitch-black water below. The chaos reaches its peak as the eye passes overhead. A deadly calm lasts 15 minutes. The wind stops. The rain stops. Inside the eye, the sky reveals a field of stars eerily glittering. Some people mistakenly think the storm is over. They crawl out of shelters, cheering with relief. But it's Leviathan's final trap. 15 minutes later, the wind wall on the far side of the eye slams in from the opposite direction, twice as savage. Structures already weakened in round one now collapse completely. The ones who just stepped outside are blown away without a trace. The destruction is total. Leviathan leaves no witnesses. When Leviathan's eye, the Category 6 meteorological monster, finally slithers over the Trong Son range and begins to weaken over Laos, it leaves behind a Southeast Asia that is no longer whole. But the disaster doesn't end when the wind stops. In fact, the real dying is only beginning now. In Washington, Tokyo, and Brussels, world leaders stare at darkened screens. Every sensor system, traffic cameras, weather stations, even satellite phone signals within a 621-mile radius has gone dead. On digital maps, Southeast Asia is now a black hole. International relief efforts are strangled before they can even begin. A squadron of cargo aircraft takes off from a base in Thailand, carrying food and medicine, trying to reach the epicenter, but they have to turn back the moment they hit the cloud edge. The post-superstorm atmosphere is violently scrambled, with invisible turbulence as sharp as razor blades, powerful enough to snap the wings of military transport planes. No aircraft can land on airports that have become saltwater lakes. At sea, the U.S. 7th Fleet and Japanese rescue ships are forced to anchor far offshore. The ocean is still raging, with residual waves 23 feet high. And they can't dock anyway. Because there are no docks left, strategic deep water ports like Da Nang, Cam Ranh, and the port of Manila have been flattened by the meteorological tsunami. Cranes lie twisted and collapsed, blocking the channels, turning bays into gigantic metal minefields. 21st century civilization has been stripped bare, exposing the raw survival instincts. No power, no clean water, no social media, no local government. Survivors of the nightmare night crawl out of soaked rubble. They don't recognize their city anymore. Asphalt roads vanish beneath 1.6 feet of fresh mud. Bloated human and livestock corpses begin to stink in the sweltering post-storm heat. The stench of death mixes with the sour reek of mud, forming a choking air that makes people vomit. Thirst hits like a wave. The tap water system has been contaminated, saltwater intrusion mixed with sewage overflow. In desperation, people begin fighting each other for every remaining bottle of water. Inside collapsed convenience stores, cash becomes scrap paper. Gold and silver are meaningless. A bottle of clean water now is worth more than a human life. In the remaining field hospitals, doctors have to operate in the dark. No anesthesia. No blood reserves. Dialysis machines stop running, which is a death sentence for thousands of patients. Cholera and typhoid begin spreading from stagnant pools of water, threatening to unleash a new wave of death.